Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you're listening from, wherever you're watching from. We know that there are different time zones around the world, and data is showing us that there are persons listening to Canute Exploration, your topic in a podcast, from as far as Canada, Russia, Cayman, Brazil. It's amazing how the podcast is taking on world traction and as we talk to people across the world about the adversities that they have gone through, addiction, talking about human trafficking, relationship issues, you know, the aim of Canute's exploration is to empower and inspire individuals. And I have a very important guest today just to talk about those things. Ryan will be talking to me as it relates to his addiction and other challenges, mental health challenges, and his book that is out perhaps to depict some of those challenges that he has been having. Let me bring Ryan into the studio to talk to me. Ryan, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me. I
I'm
appreciate it.
good. Nice. Tell me before we continue, who is Ryan? Talk to me about who are you, professionally, if you may, and personally.
Sure, sure. I'm sort of in between jobs right now. My last job, I was a peer support specialist. For those of you who don't know what that is, a peer support specialist, somebody who's struggled with either drugs or mental health,
Hmm.
and are sort of drawing from their own experiences to help other people. So that's where I'm at with working, and just been working on my book and getting ready to release the second volume
I love that. I love that.
at
I
some
love
point.
that, Ryan. Interesting. You actually explain, what you do, and in fact, most of us might have never heard of that sort of profession, so to speak. And it's important because what you do is try to empower and inspire persons who have gone through mental
Exactly.
challenges and drugs addiction. But talk to me, Ryan, about your childhood. Who were little Ryan growing up? Talk to me about you.
I had a great childhood, a great upbringing. My parent I was raised in a loving household. My parents were always there for me, always supportive. They even supported me through my addiction as well.
Yeah.
I had a good, there's high school and junior high school, can be rough for anybody, but
Hmm.
there was some rough periods there, but for the most part, I had a great childhood.
Right, right. I love that. Ryan, I read somewhere about you living on the street, throughout the addiction period of your life. I'd like to know more about that ravage of living on the streets as an addict.
So last like 3 or 4 months of 2007, I was in York, Pennsylvania. Uh, I went there to go to a halfway house there. I was in a total of about 5 different halfway houses, and I was kicked out of each one because of I was using. I mean, that was essentially the reason that they kicked me out.
Hmm.
So I would get it's a sort of a pattern. I would get kicked out. I would try to start over, find another halfway house to stay in. I would find one. I would move in, and I would get kicked out again. So I was on and off the streets. I didn't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah.
Stayed at the shelter a handful of times. It was mostly friends, um, sort of fellow addicts,
Hmm.
would let me sleep in their basement or sleep on their couch or that type of thing. But
Yeah. Explain to us, Ryan, what is you talk about houses. What are those? Kind of explain to my audience what you're talking about.
sure, yeah, a halfway house is a living arrangement. It's um, it's for people who are just starting out in their recovery. Usually, people coming out of rehab.
Hmm.
People go to detox and then they go to rehab for 28 days or however many days, and and then from rehab go to a halfway house where
Yeah.
you're in a house with fellow other people in the same situation that you're in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. And we find those houses, not only the United States. I note that there are many of those places in Jamaica, those facilities around the world to assist persons who are addiction, to transit, so to speak,
Hmm.
into society and into recovery. As we talk about recovery, the success of your recovery, what had made your recovery a success?
Well, I was in a lot of treatment, a lot of inpatient treatment. I have the diagnosis of schizophrenia
Okay.
and depression.
Hmm.
Whenever I would drink or use, it would cause the mental health problems that I have to get a lot worse very quickly. It was irrational, hostile, incoherent, not able to hold a job, not able to pay rent, not able to really do much of anything.
Yeah.
Was very mentally ill. I think, I had at one point I was an inpatient for about a year and a half,
Yeah.
uh, and then I was in a transition. So that year and a half, that was totally the staff of the facility that I was staying in,
Yeah.
that were there for me and helped me and uh, allowed me to get to some support groups, like 12 step groups,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. After after that period of time, I was in a group home for about 4 or 5 years, and
Yeah.
that was basically I always likened it to a nursing home. It's like kind of like a nursing home, but it's for mentally ill people. So I was there for 4 or 5 years. While I was there, went back to school.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually moved out, got a car, uh, wrote a book. So just sort of a success story. But
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't have been able to do any of that without the support of my family and also the support of
Yeah.
the the facilities and their staff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important. And we talk about family stigma. And tell me, how was it as it relates to the family stigma? Was your family going through a stigma as it relates to your mental illness?
I think in that, if I'm understanding your
Yeah.
question correctly, I think in the earlier stages, they didn't understand why I was doing what I was doing. They didn't understand
Mhm.
why I was using drugs.
Yeah.
So that that took a little time. Uh, Understanding the schizophrenia,
Hmm.
that took a little time. Also, I think in the very beginning, I think they sort of just didn't understand my behavior. They failed to understand it. But I mean, today it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
They know, they understand what I've been through and that kind of thing.
Ryan, I'm gonna ask you this straight out. Did they feel ashamed that a member of the family was, living with mental challenge? How do they feel within the community that the Gray family as someone
Hmm.
who had a mental challenge?
Not anymore. I think at one point there might have been a little bit of that shame. Um, Maybe. Um, like one of my family members recently said that they had some sort of reservations about my book because
Yeah.
of the my book goes into detail some of my experiences that are hard to accept and
Yeah.
very just I don't know, with volatile. I mean, just not 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 peaceful. But yeah, they one of my family members said, at one point I was, I don't know if they use the word shame, but I don't think uh they just kind of said, I don't have that shame anymore. I've
Yeah,
accepted you for what you are, or who
yeah.
you are.
And that is important, Ryan. It's nothing to be ashamed about. You're listening to Canute Exploration, your topic in the podcast. Those persons listening on their favorite podcast platform, you have to understand, and those watching as well, you have to understand that there's nothing to be ashamed about. Mental challenges, in most cases, you have not brought on yourself. It happens, and it can happen to you tomorrow morning, just like that, right? It's nothing to be ashamed about. What there are some families who actually have this stigma, this shame,
Hmm.
that, hey, what the community will say because a member of our family is living with mental challenges. Nothing to be ashamed about. And Ryan, I'm happy that you have accepted that, hey, it's okay, and I will cope and get by. But, as I say that, let me ask you the hardest part of your living with mental challenges. What would you classify as the hardest part of being mentally ill?
The hardest part is just the day-to-day living. Like I rarely have a day that I don't experience some kind of schizophrenia, whether it's
No.
delusions, voices, hallucinations. I take a lot of medication. So the medication I take for the schizophrenia is very effective.
Yeah.
So I'm obviously a lot better off taking my medication.
Yeah.
I mean, the hardest part is just probably that day-to-day struggle that, learning to take things one day at a time is probably pretty valuable, probably good advice. But also, it can also be difficult to be if you have to be hospitalized, because
Yeah.
sometimes we'll have, somebody can have a break or a meltdown. Well, meltdown's kind of a politically incorrect
Yeah.
break, a mental break of some kind, an episode, and like I had to quit my most recent job because
Yeah.
it was causing me so much anxiety that I actually had to be hospitalized. So being um being removed from my normal day-to-day situation in my job, to be hospitalized, that wasn't fun, really.
Yeah. Interesting. Because when these challenges affect a person's life, their social life, occupational life, and other relational aspect of their life, it becomes pathological, and it's really time to seek help. And Ryan, you talk about you have to quit job because of the challenges that you were having. I know, and it's nice to know that you have come to. I'm not sure how much of this is in your book, really, but let's talk about you, Ryan, the author.
So a book I wrote, it was originally like over 600 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to split it into two volumes to make it more manageable for me and for the reader.
Right,
Uh, it's essentially a memoir, and it takes place of the time that I was talking about earlier, the time where I was homeless,
mm-hmm.
on and off the street, uh, for a few months, and
Right,
it just kind of chronicles that period of time. And like as a genre, it's listed as self help,
right.
but it's not just self help. It's also I don't know if I'll call it a novel. It's not fiction. It's
Mm-hmm.
creative nonfiction. So creative nonfiction, narrative nonfiction, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest influence with writing is Jack Kerouac, who sort of was a pioneer. Had his spontaneous prose and his stream of consciousness style writing that was sort of affected by his fascination with jazz. So it's kind of a lyrical, musical kind of prose, and I've tried to model some of my writing around him. I've had other, I've had readers influence
Mhm.
compare the book to like Bukowski, William S. Burroughs, George Orwell, uh, John Font. I think
Okay,
last
yeah.
name is Fonte.
Hmm.
Um, just for the like the, I think that George Orwell, because he wrote a book called Down and Out in Paris in England,
Yeah,
in Paris and London, and that was about homelessness, surviving homelessness in a time when unemployment was extremely high. Probably compared to William S. Burroughs because of the honesty of portraying the addict lifestyle.
hmm,
Like nothing held back, just everything about that lifestyle. I think it was compared to that. And
right.
Bukowski because he had alcohol alcoholism that he couldn't hold a job. He was always crashing places, and
Yeah,
his his homelessness status was sort of a inconstant. Like he'd meet somebody and then become their friend, and they would let them stay there, and then something would happen, and they'd leave that friend, and then he would be looking somewhere else for a place to stay, and it was just kind of like that lifestyle.
yeah. Your book speaks to your experience as a, I'd like to say, homeless person, right? Nowadays they're calling it unhoused individual, but it's
Is a what?
a euphemistic name for it, right? Yeah,
What is it called?
it's unhoused individual. You're not housed, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
individuals, right?
yeah.
So it speaks to that in most cases. But your experience as a homeless person, it's really chronicled in your book, right?
Hmm.
But tell us about what you have written in your book as it relates to your experience being homeless.
Uh, I think I remember being sort of envious, even resentful, towards people that had, like, and this is going to sound kind of negative, but like you're walking down the street and you see a super fancy restaurant, and you can see the people inside, and it's just kind of like you just get, it's kind of like, well, what about me? It's just this sort of a sort of a resentment, towards even that, they didn't those people didn't do anything, but it's like the thought of, well, that bottle of wine is probably could have fed me and my friends for a week or something, like it's just sort of like a resentment. I think there's a definitely, you said stigma. I think
Right.
there's a big stigma, right, especially right now with uh most folks when they see somebody on the median asking for a change,
Yeah.
it's like a lot of people are just kind of go, oh, get a job,
Yeah.
get yourself a shower and get a job and stop bugging me,
Yeah.
it's sort of, it's a hard it's a cycle that's hard to get out of. It's not an easy lifestyle at all, and it's not it's
Yeah.
not simple.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as just getting a job,
You said something earlier on, Ryan, about not being able to keep a job because of the addiction and the
Yeah.
mental challenges. It's happening. No matter who is to be blamed, it's happening. And therefore, when someone, not necessarily you, who would go out there and ask for a change, as you put it, right, and say go and get a job, but really, in reality, they just cannot hold a job. They cannot get a job.
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard. It's responsibility, and an accountability. Um,
Yeah.
like the job that I had was that I had a job at a temporary employment agency,
Right.
and they were real lax about people when people come in. So I don't think I lost that job, but I thought I was barely going in anymore.
Yeah.
Um, but it can be. What I remember is the homeless shelter. They would have a requirement that you go to their chapel service every night. If you
Okay.
didn't go to the chapel service, that wouldn't let you sleep there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and I found that just doing that at a place, like I guess a place and a time and an event,
Yeah.
while I was homeless and I was mentally ill, very mentally ill, not taking my medication, it
Yeah.
was hard for me to be able to put together, okay, I need to be here.
Mhm.
I know where here is. I have to be here at a certain time
Yeah.
for a certain reason. I need to make sure I sign my name when I go in the thing. I need to
Yeah.
make sure I go in, I attend it, and then it's like you sort of take for granted the ability to easily, just kind of drive your car somewhere and park and get out and do whatever it is. But I found it. This is just my experience, but I found, I had friends that would help me get to the shelter
Yeah.
because I was, you just down and out
Yeah.
is the
Yeah. Interesting. And as we prepare to wrap up here, Ryan, we know that there are many teenagers, adolescents who are committing suicide, these days, and they are depressed. They're suffering from other mental illnesses, other mental challenges, and many of them are perhaps on drugs, right? And what would you say to the parents, and as we talk about familial stigma and family members of
hmm
active addicts and mental health challenged individuals, children?
uh I would be supportive. My parents were incredibly supportive, and I had to hit bottom first before I decided to make any kind of change. But they were there when I did hit bottom. They were there. They took me to rehab. Um, they got me into these treatment facilities, and so one thing is just not give up on them.
Mhm.
Um, to kind of I like that you brought up stigma a few times,
Yeah, yeah,
because if you can understand the addiction and or the mental health and sort of having a more modern informed view of that, and not rather than just being stigmatized about it.
right.
um the unfortunate truth, it's not really a truth. I've met a lot of people that were able to identify themselves as addict or alcoholic
Yeah.
before they hit bottom, but most of the time the person
Mm.
the person has to hit bottom before any change is made.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it doesn't. I mean, nowadays happens a lot,
Yeah.
heck of a lot, is people are getting help before it gets that bad.
Yeah. 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 So you see, you talk about getting help. At what point, what journey, what part of the journey did you note that, hey, Ryan, you need to get some help?
It was towards the end. It was the end of 2007, um, and I was living in somebody's basement. The people that lived there were fellow addicts,
Hmm.
and they were facing eviction. So when they were
Yeah.
basically, I I would have nowhere to go. Like
Hmm.
before that, I sort of had a halfway house to go to sometimes. I had another friend who let me, crash on their couch and stuff.
Yeah.
And that fell through. So when this situation in the basement fell through, uh, I had no other choice.
Hmm.
I could either it was a choice, but not really. It's beyond choosing because
Yeah.
it was either to stay to be completely homeless with nowhere to go, no job, no money, not a lot of friends, with nothing really left.
Yeah.
And it was a choice between that and getting help. So I think the acceptance process, like accepting that I was, powerless, um, that I needed help, was
Yeah.
towards the end there when I was being kicked out.
Yeah. Interesting. I have something final thing I'd like you to do. Not necessarily a question, but I want to ask you. Well, basically to talk to the youths. It's not a question for you personally, but I want you to reach out to the youths who are basically thinking about going into drugs. And also those who are in drugs. Talk to them. Talk to them. Those who are addicted. No, talk to them, please.
Um, well, I can say I started using drugs when I was really, it started when I was 19, and I had a few years of drug use. You would think that at the bottom, at my rock bottom, uh, the success that I've gone from that rock bottom to today, to, like I said, having, car, my own place, going back to school and getting a bachelor's degree, um, friends, supportive family. Uh, I like, my brother's got two little girls that I know I get to be a part of their lives, and it just goes to show you, there's I've come a long way, and you can come a long way too. So don't second guess yourself. Think that you're gonna be this, if you're not liking yourself and you're suicidal and you're, in high school, which a lot of people don't like. I didn't like high school either.
Yeah.
Um, that's things just to consider what's possible and just reaching out. There's a lot of support, you could find online. I know that I thought it was remarkably easy to find a psychiatrist or a therapist. There's a website called psychologytoday.com, and you just put in your address, and it gives you a list of, like, psychologists in the area. So it's actually really easy to reach out. That's one way you can reach out. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's the SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and there's a national helpline, 1-800-662 help.
Yeah. Interesting, Ryan. I like the way how you went on and actually try to get that information so that my audience could hear it, and basically uh, get some help, as you have said, in order to deal with this mental illness, and in addition to that, the addiction that they may be fighting. And tell me something, Ryan. Do you have any contact? For instance, one of my listeners want to get in touch with you. Do you have any contact?
Yeah, there's a few ways to contact me. My name's Ryan Gray. Um, so you can look on Facebook. Amazon has my book, which is called Twilight in York, Volume One. And also, I started a website called www.twilightinyork.com.
Yeah, and I have it up there on the screen, right? So that they can get there. And listeners, you can find this website in the description of this episode, so you can contact Ryan. Ryan, and the final words.
I don't know. Let me think.
You're listening to Canute's Exploration, your topic in
Yeah.
a podcast. I'm Dr. Canute White. I'm talking to Ryan Gray. I know he had struggled with addiction and homelessness. Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, no, that was, I think I covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover.
Right.
I'm just glad that I was able to kind of fit the podcast to talk about struggle and
Yeah.
definitely, obviously, my situation and struggle with addiction and mental health.
Right.
Just glad to be here, be able to tell my story. Um,
And thanks for that.
it going in detail would take a long time
Yeah.
because I was in so many hospitals and going from this institution to that institution and so on. So, but I'm glad I was able to cover everything that we were able to cover.
Yes, Ryan, and we're happy. We're glad that we were able to hear your story and to be inspired by your story. And definitely I was inspired. I was empowered. And I'm sure that my audience will be inspired and empowered as well. Thanks for coming on Canute's Exploration, your topic in the podcast. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Bye bye. So that was Ryan Gray. You heard him. He had gone through so much in his life, addiction, homelessness, and he told you about being in hospital so many times. And he said to you guys, you who are in high school and you teenagers, adolescents who are perhaps thinking about getting involved in drugs, and maybe you who are depressed, living with anxiety and other form of mental challenges. I'm hoping that you were empowered, inspired by Ryan's story. We'll talk again. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching Canute's Exploration.